indecision is worse than the wrong decision.
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to GrowthReady, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high-performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, we welcome in best-selling author and esteemed sales coach, Kristin Gutierrez, whose mindset of adversity happening for her has led her to not only seeing her own growth journey positively impacted, but has now positioned her to serve others to maximize their own offers so as to ready them to step into pursuing true fulfillment. And welcome back into the most recent installment of the GrowthReady Podcast. I am so excited to be welcoming in Kristin Gutierrez to the show today. And Kristin, before we start learning about all these wonderful ways that you can impact our listeners, I would love for you to answer the question that I have everybody answer at the beginning of every episode. And that is, what does it mean to you to be growth ready?
To me, growth ready means leaning into imperfect action, putting one foot in front of the other and figuring it out as you go.
You just won the shortest, most insightful response that we've ever had. And you know what's funny? When I first came up with that question, my goal was always to be like in 10 seconds or in one sentence or anything like that. And then I said, nah, to heck with it. And some people will go into 2 minutes. I want you to tell us that again. Leaning into, do it again. Leaning into
imperfect action.
Uh-huh.
What did I say?
You forgot already?
I just don't remember verbatim what I said. Leaning into imperfect action and figuring it out as you go.
Figuring it out as you go in its simplest form.
Yeah. We talk about why I believe that, but
yeah,
like the core of who I am.
Yes. And so this is why I was really looking forward to this today, is this notion of so much that you speak to is about really embracing the parts of us that aren't perfect and just saying like, hey, you know what? This is who I am. This is how it is. And to make the best of it and to take those steps that we're capable of taking. And so with that being said, I'd love to just learn a little bit more about, for everybody listening, it would be great just to get a little bit more context on specifically what kind of work you're doing today and who it is that you're doing it for. Like, who are the people that are benefiting the most from the work that you do today?
Well, and thank you so much, Steve, for having me on your show. Of course, it is honestly a privilege to be here. I do think the story that's most relevant for audiences right now is in April of 2023, I was unexpectedly let go from my 6-figure VP of sales corporate job. Mm-hmm. And immediately that day, I leaned into imperfect action and I decided that things happen for me, not to me. And so instead of seeking comfort on my couch or watching Netflix mm-hmm. or binge eating a box of Oreos, I don't know, I chose to seek comfort in action. And I didn't carry around that negative, like, woe is me energy. And I simply started to move. I didn't realize what direction I was moving in yet. I just started and kept moving. Mm-hmm. And by 2 p.m. that same day, I landed my first consulting client. All of a sudden, I'm a sales consultant to other companies. And I just kept showing up every single day, 2 years later almost, mm-hmm. iterating as I go, iterating who I serve and how I serve them. Today, I'm honored to serve entrepreneurs. Broadly speaking, when I meet people, I'll say I help entrepreneurs make more money. Mm-hmm. But for an audience like this, it's like coaches, course creators, consultants, like how to package or repackage your offer mm-hmm. to make it worth more without dying in implementation like I was. When I was selling sales consulting, I found myself 6 months later having made good money, but I was either constantly on the phone implementing what I sold, or on the other phone trying to prospect for more business. So how do you work smarter, not harder?
Yeah. And for me, I take different approaches every time when we have guests on, knowing what it is you do beforehand. And this time it makes a lot of sense because of how recent so much of it is in many ways, the last 2 years. I really wanted to touch on that immediately because what it does is it brings people into the here and now of how quickly you've started impacting people in the last 2 years with this kind of stuff. To even now hear that the story really took off within literally hours of you having the awareness, coming off the couch. Was what you were watching on Netflix inspiring or something like that?
No, it wasn't. No, the narrative goes, as humans, we seek comfort. And most people would have chosen to I don't know if you were ever impacted by all these crazy layoffs that have been happening globally. I hadn't. Yeah. And it was so unexpected. Yeah. And I was just my heart sank. I'm in the middle of a divorce. I'm texting my ex-husband. I have no idea what is happening. I just start, and it's 10 minutes. The phone call with my CEO and the SVP of HR, it was 10 minutes. And I'm but what now? Yeah. And I just started texting people and calling people, and I just never stopped moving. So incidentally, I was leaning into this imperfect action because had I sought comfort on the couch, that is when you start to just have a pity party, and it's okay. There's this concept of are you burning yourself out by moving too fast? But I mean, divorced, we were in a financial crisis. We have 2 very small kids. The line in the sand was thick enough, deep enough now that I had no other choice.
Yeah. And I, in many ways, was joking about the Netflix thing, but what it does is it represents so much that is true to where we find ourselves most days, is that we focus on the things that allow us to fall deeper into our seat or fall deeper into our thoughts and most importantly, fall deeper into inaction. And so much that you're alluding to here is this it's a great example of that notion of dying in the implementation part of it is how we get caught up in ideas and thoughts and processes. And this is how I'm going to do it when the time's right and all this kind of stuff. And just to sort of bring you up to speed with my own story is that 3.5 years ago when I started my business, it came about 2 years after people in their droves had been encouraging me to start a business as an executive coach. And it took me 2 years of thinking it through and how do I do it? And what's funny is that when I actually took the step, so little was perfect about the environment that I was making that decision in. But it was the fact that I took the step. I decided to take the jump. And that in itself became almost the perfect step, if you will.
Yes. We'll talk about my 4-step framework for saying yes and figuring it out.
I love that.
It's right there. Yeah.
Well, let's rewind a little bit though into those years of working in corporate America as you were, and the sort of safety that can come with that. I was just actually joking about that with my wife this past weekend. Was sometimes I look at her with the comfort of her position and the comfort of her salary, and I just go, why do I do what I do? Why do I choose entrepreneurship? And here we are. So much of your work is with entrepreneurs, and I think, going back to those years now of when you were in that so-called steady environment, where did you maybe notice yourself being guilty of some of these behaviors that you're now obviously providing solutions to?
Well, it's so interesting because my grandfather, and I'm sure others in my family, but my grandfather was an entrepreneur. And after college, I lived with him for a minute, which is very atypical. But I remember him saying one night after dinner, why doesn't anybody want to be an entrepreneur in the family? Why doesn't anybody want to take over my business? But respectfully, Grandpa, he had a ball bearing manufacturing company. They were, not my skill set, right? Yeah. He was an engineer by trade. And that just kind of always stuck with me. But I found myself hopping around jobs for a minute and then all of a sudden ending up in the industry I ended up in 2005 and finding excitement climbing the corporate ladder as a salesperson, and then realizing in hindsight that I was being mentored by really good people. I kind of started to put the pieces together. Oh, this is a really good thing, and I've made it even a better thing. That in 2023, I decided I wanted to be our chief revenue officer because there was a position open. And respectfully, my CEO said, "You're not ready." So I decided on a whim to write a book, which is, I think, so inspiring for a lot of people listening, because I don't know. I forgot to, like, are you a best-selling author yet, Steve?
I wouldn't say it's best-selling, but I do have a book. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm sure.
Best-selling in my family. Best-selling in my family. So, yeah.
Did you grow up wanting to write a book, or
not at all? I had every bit of evidence in my childhood would just suggest that this man should never write a book. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Right. So whatever the case is, but it's a tool. And I knew that writing Be a Better Sales Leader could help elevate me within my company and or just to get the next step.
Sure.
Well, what happened was March 1st, I started to write the book. I know it was my birthday, March 1st. April 17th, I got let go from my job. May 31st, I released the book. So in 3 months, I wrote and released a book and still had insert the correct colorful adjective to write a book called Be a Better Sales Leader, having been let go as a sales leader, right? A lot of that imposter syndrome would stop a lot of people dead in their tracks. But I knew what happened to me wasn't what happened, or I knew this thing happened for me. And so then the book became this tool that allowed and opened doors for all these conversations for my sales consulting business to really take off.
What a wonderful timing of events, in that
I know.
I think for anyone listening to this, the immediate idea that comes to mind is how we can sometimes almost stop ourselves in our tracks because we don't consider ourselves an expert. You know, and just listening to your story, I just like, okay, there's someone who could have so easily just said,
I give up.
Clearly, I'm not an expert. Like, I've just lost my job. How can I possibly be an expert on this? And even going, you know, just even alluding to my own book it's about realizing your potential. And so you sit with that and you just go, well, what makes you an expert? Well, the story in the book is of me helping another person realize their potential. So that's what I'm an expert in when it came to that specific story. So I'm just curious, when you look at your book as an example of how you grew yourself and positioned yourself to do what you're doing today, how were you able to get to that level of comfortability where you just said, hey, you know what? I'm going to allow the book itself. I'm just curious, like, how did you get comfortable with that notion of putting yourself out there potentially to be perceived as an expert when it comes to this?
Yeah, so there's two things that come to mind. One is Malcolm Gladwell says, we are an expert once we've spent 10,000 hours doing a thing. So don't do the math. You're clearly, you know, at our age, we're experts in a lot of things, but we are also our own worst critic. So there's that. But then the book was, and I believe I even mentioned this in the first couple chapters, like, if this helps only one other person be a better, in this case, sales leader, then it will have served its purpose. Because rather than taking the pressure off, like, this has to impact tens of thousands of millions of people, like, if it just helps one person. And not only that, like, the more and more and more people started to read the book, they're like, you should have you mistitled it. It should be called Be a Better Leader. And like, they're giving me feedback for my future books and other iterations to take the narrative from the book. So it 100% had the right impact it was supposed to have, but it's taking the pressure off yourself to say, like, it only needs to impact one person. And maybe that person's your dad, but undoubtedly it will be other people on the internet who don't even know you.
For sure. And I would love to just move to now, when you think about your own growth journey and how you arrived where you arrived, capable and ready to do what you ended up deciding to do by starting your business. If you were just to go back now through the years and look at your own development, where did you maybe see, or what evidence did you see of, okay, if and when there were ever a time that Kristin would need to carry the load and step up and be ready to do that, what part of your growth journey showed that is something that you'd be capable of doing?
So probably as a young girl, like in my era, we had like Babysitters Club, and like I was a very, very young babysitter with like a fake business and a binder and all the things. Like, and now as a mom of a 4-year-old and 6-year-old, I'm like, I watched who at what age? So there's that. Then I had a brother 10 years younger than me, and I had older siblings, but I felt like we were at the age in the generation where we watched our younger brother a lot. And so there was kind of that leadership level. But in college, I worked a lot in retail, Gap, Banana Republic, places like that, Limited. And I'll never forget, like my senior year of college, I was a key holder, like a next level under the assistant manager. Like they trusted me. And I did that job all while carrying like a full course load. And it brought me fulfillment, right? And then in 2005 or 6 or 7, when I first ended up where I ended up, and they promoted me to manager of global inside sales, and my company was based in the UK. So I was traveling as a 25-year-old to the UK several times a year to manage a team of older gentlemen. And they looked up to me. They respected what I would say. Like I would share best practices with them. So, if you look back on your life, I think the thread is probably always there, but we don't always pull on it.
So how are you helping people then today become way more aware of that thread? Because that's kind of what I'm hearing here. It's like can we become more aware of the thread as we're going through it, or is it always going to be in hindsight?
No, because so in April, end of 2023, after I had been monetizing my sales expertise, I was stuck. I was like literally, like I said, dying in implementation, and I was looking for the next way to scale. So my current mentors had gotten me that far. And I believe in hiring more coaches and trying to figure it out. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So I invested in more coaching. Someone say more coaching. And she taught me the systems of high ticket offers and like selling one to many, which allowed me to get off the phone and have online events and connect real with people. Crazy enough, even as a 20-year corporate salesperson, it turns out how you sell to corporations is very different than how you sell to individuals. So it took me falling on my face a lot to figure out how to relearn how to sell, right? Yeah. And then, so the point is now that I'm so confident, so for about a year, I gave myself permission to serve this entrepreneur. And there's various levels. There's people who are just getting started, and there's people who are looking to make $1 million a day. And like, they just need the next system to unlock. I find that if I'm at the playground with my friend, like literally the other day, and her husband's telling me he's in between jobs and yada, 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 he wants to restore old tools. I find myself telling, because he's asking, what do you do? I've never really asked. And so it's this concept of like, I'm not here to tell people what they could or should do, but it isn't always in hindsight, to your point. It sometimes is in the present. They just aren't aware that, yeah, you could go out there and sell the product at a fair, but like you've already just sat here and told me that's not working. Yeah. Or you can coach other people on how, whatever the system is, whatever the 5 or 6 steps are that you take to restore old tools, you can teach others how to do the same. And, this is happening every single day right now in my life. And like nothing brings me more fulfillment than helping people see something that they've probably been sitting on, and they don't need to wait until hindsight. They can act on it in the present moment.
Yeah. I think so much of our audience is this is resonating right now in the sense of the aha moments, and sometimes feeling as though they come way too late. They come at a point where it's like, did the window of opportunity go by for that to really have been optimized and maximized in the moment? And I'm sure as I listen to this, it's like, hey, it'd be great to have those aha moments at way better times, at times that can serve me in that moment. Because I'm with you immediately on firstly on just the ability to sell and how to speak with individuals as opposed to corporations. But then going even further is this notion of the fulfillment piece, is actually pursuing the fulfillment piece. Because for me, when we're aligned in our fulfillment, our awareness is significantly heightened to opportunity when it's like, oh, that'll fulfill me. That will 100% fulfill me. And and I can't miss it because my antenna for fulfillment is so great and so clear that it's literally impossible to miss this kind of thing. And I feel like that's what I'm kind of hearing from you.
I never knew what it was to love truly what you did, because I really loved my job. Like my team, like I loved what I do. I loved what I sold. I loved who I worked for. I loved my team. But something happened when I started to lean into monetizing my own expertise, that I would stand outside. I mean, I still do. Like I would like walk outside with my hands up and just like thank the universe and like tap my chest and be like, I'm so grateful. And that's this fulfillment that I never knew existed before, while in my case, working for somebody else.
Yeah.
And, you know, they say that like we're right on time. Everything is right on time for us. So it isn't never too late, but society tricks us into thinking sometimes it is.
Yeah. And one thing I want to make sure we don't fall into the trap here of making this just about entrepreneurs. We do have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this, and just to be able to now even use your former self, you know, the person that wasn't a full-time job. And if you were working with that version of yourself now, to maybe even provide some of the very insights and the services that you do now to help support that person and better that person. I'd love for you just to kind of walk us through that part of maybe how you would approach that individual who can be optimizing and bettering the way in which they show up and perform in pursuit of what it is they know in that respective organization or on that respective career path, what they are pursuing and what it is they're truly driven to fulfill.
That's a good question, Steve, because the other book I almost wrote was like finding your C-suite spot, which is exactly this concept of taking ownership of your career trajectory and understanding that there is internal influence and then external influence that you should be positioning yourself for at any given time. Internally, making sure that you're having good relationships, that you're finding mentors, and that you're looking for executive sponsors to care, no matter what type of company or organization you work in. Like, how do you really, like, not all relationships are going to be perfect, but that's that's just life, right? So how do you make sure that internally you have the right clout? And that was always something that innately I figured out, but I had also been really well mentored. So that's like one half of finding your C-suite spot. And then the other half is externally. So while you work for another company, I mean, the reality is for me, social media for corporations is LinkedIn. And aside from what your company's policy may or may not be, and I'm not talking about like doing things that are outside of any of that, but you can be seen and should be seen as an expert, no matter what your job is. It's like, how do you position yourself online by commenting on other people's posts and creating your own posts, or going live with other people on LinkedIn, or creating newsletters like they have the ability, and like articles and all the assets that LinkedIn provides. How do you leverage that? I called this always a passion project within your role. So it's, well, okay, this is two things. So it's like LinkedIn is part of the passion project within your role. And then what's the second offshoot of that is, what's the other thing you can do within your industry that's maybe just outside your company? So I worked in the translation localization industry. Okay. You might be giving your native, right? So like I worked in that industry for 20 years, and we had a nonprofit called Women in Localization. And there was a lot of other organizations you could join. I found like leadership opportunities for myself within Women in Localization, because it further gave me all this exposure to other women and people within the industry, buyers, other salespeople. It didn't matter. Like, now you're collaborating for a different reason to move the business forward. And so that like kept me up at night. Like, that's the thing that like lit me on fire, was being part of a community that was related to my industry, but that was outside of my current employer. So you've got like ways internally to do it, and then ways externally to do it. And when you're doing all of that, you're naturally, you know, having the right conversations with people to get promoted, or you're looking for promotions. And then respectfully, people outside of your company, whether in your industry or outside, they are going to see you. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing. That's a good thing for you and your employer. Yeah.
And I love how you started it with the expertise piece, because I think the expertise immediately insist that you get clear on the direction. You know, it's in a way it creates the intention around all that work that you just explained. Is if you don't know your expertise, then there's going to be a little bit of all of that work that you just described is going to be kind of chaotic and a little bit vague. You're going to be in groups that's like, do I belong in this group? Is this group really for me? But just simply starting with the expertise, it's suddenly now, well, I know if these are my expertise and these are people that are above me that share similar expertise, that have whatever more going for them than I currently do. That sounds like the kind of people that I need to be around. That seems to be the kind of direction that I need to be going, right?
Mm-hmm. It's like find a mentor. I would like the bottom line is like find a coach. Mm-hmm. We exist. Find a coach, find a mentor, an executive sponsor, or somebody who is at the C-level wherever you work and who wants to take you under their wing. Sometimes you can ask for that, but often they're suggesting it. But have people that you know, like, and trust at other companies you worked at or places you want to work, so they can help guide you as well. I accidentally had a lot of it, and luckily I realized what I had. And so then I started to use it for what it was worth, asking for advice and helping guide me down the right path, to the right organization, to the right nonprofit, supporting my content.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's get into now maybe some of the practical areas that you offer to your clients right now. And, the one thing I'm always all too aware of is that, everyone's on different walks and everyone's on different paths in this journey in terms of what they want from their growth process. But I would love just to learn from you. You referenced the 4-step something earlier, I forget, but I think even just sort of touching on something like that right now, I think would be great for our listeners, just to sort of say, okay, if I were to start in terms of this pursuit of fulfillment and this pursuit of purpose and finding joy, I definitely want to touch on the joy piece. I know you talk about that quite a lot. But talk to us through this 4-step exercise you were just referencing.
I think it's excellent, because no matter if you're internal at an organization looking to find fulfillment by climbing the corporate ladder, or externally already stepping into your expertise to monetize or want to, it's constantly imposter syndrome and comparison or paralysis by overanalysis that gets us stuck. And so when you use this 4-step framework as your guide, you find that you can get things done, whether that's in a day or in a month or in a season. So the first step is to simply decide. And so it sounds so simple, but it isn't, because indecision is worse than the wrong decision. And so simply making a decision that you're going to do 100 phone calls today, or pursue finding a mentor, or when I was in corporate, like asking my CEO, will he mentor me? I had to ask him 3 different times, because no or ignoring you doesn't always mean no, right? So you have to decide. And then the second step is simply to take a step. And that's why my eyes lit up earlier when you were telling your story, because you're telling us that you simply took a step.
Right.
And it is, I always talk about this concept of 100 phone calls a day, because there is this like go for no, where like, whether you're in corporate sales or whatever, like just keep going until you hear no, which means you'll undoubtedly find a yes. But it's not even about that. Like, really, in corporate sales, you have to physically make phone calls and send emails in order to find business. And that can feel very daunting. Mm-hmm. So instead of looking at like the total pile of things you need to do, just take one step, one singular, tiny little step. Then the third step of the framework is to lean in. So like, who are you leaning into? What are you leaning into? Is it help? Is it guidance? Is it support? And that looks different for everybody depending on what the thing is. And then the fourth most fun step is to celebrate. Like in life, I just now celebrate the heck out of everything. So often we think, oh, we can't celebrate until we accomplish that big weight loss goal, or until we make the 100 phone calls or write or finish the book. No, you should be celebrating the fact that you decided to write a book, that you got the title, that you wrote a chapter, that you, like, every single step along the way, we should be celebrating life, the transactions that happen. That'll trick our brain into releasing a lot of dopamine and triggering to us that we're on the right path. And so you simply restart that 4-step framework over as many times a day or a month or a season as you need to.
And I really appreciate that part of the context, because I think this, again, as you were just explaining this through, in my mind, I'm like, well, I think I've done that sometimes in like an hour. I think I've hit all 4 of those in an hour. And I think sometimes when we hear these frameworks, it's like, oh, this must be like over a year or a quarter or whatever it is, a month. And so true. Like I probably been at an event, speaking with someone and worked all 4 of these in the matter of a conversation.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to me that you've actually got something here that is that adaptable. It could be used totally on a macro level, but certainly in many, many micro levels as well.
The micro level is, we don't realize it. That's what gives me the chills right now. Like, that's what stops so many people is like, I'm not her, or I'm not him, or I couldn't this, or our internal objections are just constantly, our limiting beliefs are stopping us. But when it's okay to dream big, it's okay to have these goals. It's okay to say, this is where I'm headed. But you learn along the way that it is about the micro goals within the goal. Like, how are you going to scale beyond $1 million this year? And like detaching yourself from the how and like just constantly trying to figure things out. Now you're like, every 20 minutes, you're like going through the 4 steps. You're going through the 4 steps and you're like, holy cow, look at all the things I've done today. Now you're elevating at a higher frequency and your brain is just like, you're going.
For sure. And I'd love to almost challenge you now as well to sort of bring this into the personal side, because we'd love to hit both in this podcast. Is so much of this formula, naturally, it's easy to sort of say, this is how, you help with sales and this is how you help with your business. But again, here I am as a guy that loves to work out. I love to eat well, all this kind of stuff. And I look at this and I go, well, you know what, Steve, if you're going to add an extra whatever in terms of your exercise, decide, take a step, lean in, celebrate. So I would love for you just to kind of speak. How have you seen this be beneficial on a more personal level?
Yeah. Well, recently I lost like 10 plus inches. It doesn't even matter how many pounds, mad. I mean, I hired a coach, right?
Yeah.
Taught me body recomposition, and I had to learn a new way of eating. I had to learn all these things, but it is like, I made the decision, right? I mean, they had asked me before, their friends, hey, let us coach you. No, I'm busy. So I finally made the decision to take the body recomposition. And then I took a step by paying for it. It was not cheap.
Sure.
And then I leaned in, and of course they had a community of people. They would show up on Sunday night for calls, and that's not always easy with kids, but like they had a little Facebook group. So where are you leaning into? And then I would celebrate the heck out of it, because eating 6 times a day, 2 hours apart, a certain number of macros, that was just like, whoa. Even though I work from home, but that's a lot. Right. And so it was a constant daily, hourly cycle of that, running through those 4 steps, deciding that I'm not going to cheat on my diet, or that I can eat anything I want as long as it fits your macros, and like reframing a lot of the things I had created in my own head about what it meant to lose weight or whatever. Because, we get old. Like, oh yeah, that doesn't work for me.
You're alluding to yourself being a lot older than you actually are. I just want to make that clear if people are listening to this. Yes. Well, I think, and what you're touching on here with reframing as well is that we're getting into the heart of reframing beliefs. So much of what you're talking about, it's to work a framework like that is a way to sort of, just really recalibrate how we operate, how we think, how we see ourselves. You talk about the ability to lose weight, whatever it may be, better quality diet. As you're going through that, if you're not acknowledging the growth and the effort by celebrating, are you ever actually improving? Are you ever actually rewiring the way you look at yourself and have that belief? Because that's the achievement, I believe, when we get, because, again, my wife has tried so many different things. And every time when she tries different diets and different things and whatever it may be, when she's at her happiest and most fulfilled is when she tells me that she feels great. She doesn't mention the inches. She doesn't mention the weight number, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
She's all about whatever I'm doing, I feel awesome. And I'm like, that's the celebration. That's all I care about. That's all anybody should care about, really,
right.
At the heart of this thing.
Yeah, you're right. You are 100% right. And they would say the same. My coaches for that would say the same. And we get so stuck in our own ways. We get so attached to something. Russell Brunson talks about internal objections, external objections, and vehicle-based objections. So as it relates to body recomposition, right? And your wife or me, it's like the limiting beliefs that we believe to be true. Oh, this isn't considered a success until XYZ on the scale, or the size blue jeans I'm wearing.
Yep.
And then external beliefs are the things other people say, right? Like she said, you'll never do this, or he said this about you, or society says this. And then the objections you have about the vehicle, the thing you're being sold or buying. Is like, oh, I've tried every weight loss regimen known to man.
Yep.
Why on earth would this one work? Right. But once we overcome those three types of objections for ourselves as buyers of a thing, now we're in a position to receive the real benefit, which you keep alluding to is this fulfillment.
Yeah. Yeah. You touched on success there for a minute. You just mentioned, you mentioned how we can run things through this lens of how we deem something to be a success. And I'm just curious, it is something that occasionally comes up enough on this podcast for me to then stop somebody in the conversation and just ask the question outright. Like, for you, when you think about what you're doing, how do you define what it means to be successful in what you're doing now?
These days, it's through the impact of helping others. It really is the service of others. I teach people how to serve the person they want to serve, but maybe serve them later once they've made money, because depending on somebody's financial situation, and I know for me, for almost my whole life, it was money, 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 money. But stepping into this, being 2 years in now, it really is the fulfillment of others. And serving at a higher level means how I customize my coaching programs to allow certain people to join. While I don't waver from the price, we come up with creative ways to bring them in. And that's serving at a higher level versus saying, nope, wire me all types of money and then we'll get started and I'll over promise and under deliver. It really is like success to me is this concept of impact, which is the fulfillment.
It's hard for folks to, someone's listening to this right now, and if they're not happy with where they are financially, if they're not happy with where they are physically, if they're not happy with where they are relationships, spiritual, whatever it may be, this is where an insight like this, they sometimes go, well, it's easy for you to say you've got blah, 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 blah. And one thing I always acknowledge that when people share what it is you just shared, because it's important that we then back it up with, this has been consistent with your story. This isn't now a result of because you focused on other things. You've actually, as you've articulated your journey with us today, the focus has been on delivering fulfillment, but it happened to start with you first. And now you are in a position of privilege to be the one providing fulfillment to others. And that for me is why your story resonates with me, is because that was so true about me when I went out on my own 3.5 years ago. When I decided that, hey, I'm going to do what's right for Steve and provide Steve fulfillment, which some may hear, that's kind of selfish. It's like, well, we kind of have to do that sometimes. But then in doing that, you free up yourself to then be of that to others, to provide others that same opportunity. But if you listen to this and thinking, I have to do that before I even focus on myself, it's like, no, that's not what we're saying. That's not what we're saying. But the pursuit of fulfillment, the pursuit of establishing your purpose, experiencing joy, you should be selfish enough to actually want those things and go and get those things.
Yeah, like they say, put your oxygen mask on first before helping others.
There you go. Yeah. I love it. Let's talk about joy. I'd love to, just because I know you speak on it. It is something that you're known for. And in terms of just, obviously I've asked you that question already around success. I'm curious that when you look at the way in which joy shows up in your world today, what is it about joy that just makes it this thing that is worth having around in every single aspect? Because it seems like a silly question. Why would we want to have joy? But we're not great at actually just going finding it and holding on to it, I don't think.
I don't think so either, because for a long, long, long time, I didn't realize you could have fun while you work.
Right. Yeah.
And some of that comes with where do you work, and you're not your own boss, and you do have to look like the brand, whatever that means if you're out doing sales presentations like we used to. So but there's still like something came alive in me, and people would feedback it to me when I stepped out into my own me. This is when it happened for me, right? But it was like, they'll say to me that your external matches your internal. So like the way you're showing up all of a sudden on LinkedIn or on social media is also the Kristin that we all know, like, and trust. Yeah. And that was so fulfilling for me, because I know the word of 2024 was like authenticity, or it was 23 or 24, right? Like,
I can't keep up with the words.
I know I can't. But it was me really being authentic. And when you are authentic, then you have joy and you're happy and you're celebrating. Mm-hmm. Because I realized that, again, like the sales team I built at the last company, we still all talk. Mm. I created this culture project for us. We did a lot of things within our micro world, because at work, whether you work for yourself or somebody else, you're there at work a lot. You're there at work more than you're with your kids.
Right.
Probably. But today, joy and fulfillment and celebration to me means the little things. Working only from 11 to 2 every day, or being able to take my kids out of school before 5 p.m., which sounds crazy to some people, but that's what working parents have to do. Their kids go to school and then after school until 5 p.m. these days. Yep. And that's cool. Like every other week, they're still at school till 5 p.m. But like, where can I find little pockets of time to really be present in the everyday moments? And then so there's a few examples. And then another example that really started to hit me home was I started walking every day. And like, sometimes I listen to the birds and the bees, like, for sure, that's good. But sometimes I listen to an audible book on like 2x. Yeah. and it really just like lights me up. Like, so many books I could name where like I've listened to on walks, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm living in my imagination now, and I'm getting ideas from my business while I'm out there doing something that's not sitting at my desk. So how can we work, again, this concept of working smarter, not harder, because we only get one life.
We sure do. And we're all about that on this podcast is how can we optimize this time that we have while we're here, and without making everything we do about our business and our job and all that kind of thing. And so I think what you've been able to do for us today, Kristin, is exactly that, is help us see that there are ways and approaches that we can take to ensure that the way we go about this thing called life is something that we optimize and we do effectively and efficiently for all the right reasons. And I would love just to kind of pass it over to you here as we start to close this out, is just from your perspective, when you have someone right in front of you that is just caught and stuck and unable to move, and I appreciate you've provided some different insights here today. What would be that one insight that you're gonna help someone get out of that feeling of stuck and just lean in and step into finally some form of, even if it's imperfect, some form of action?
Oh, I think this happened the other day in my kitchen. Honestly, like I was talking to my friend, and he's saying, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to teach other people on how to do art. Right. So it's like, what I would do is I would just ask them, like, what's holding you back? Like, really, truly, like, what is holding you back from unlocking your next level? And depending on what that person says, it could be, how do you lean into your corporate job more? How do you get more exposure? How do you climb the corporate ladder? I am not anti-corporate, right? Mm-hmm. And it could be, I don't like my job, and yet I've tried to monetize this other thing and it just hasn't worked for me. And it's so fun to do, but it's so frustrating at the same time. These are the kind of conversations that I've been having recently. And it really is simply like, but are you allowing yourself to take off the handcuffs of what society says or what you think is right or what other people have said to you, and just live in your imagination to like if I could do this, what would that look like to you? And this is what happened to my friend. He threw out this crazy idea and he was like, I didn't even have to say anything. He was like, that's it, isn't it? And I said, that is it for you. That could be it for you. That could be it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you provided him an invoice for the time. And, I mean, that's what I do with my friends, But anyway, but I love that insight of just like what is holding you back. Again, it's something. It is one of those questions that comes up quite often in my world of coaching as well. And so for me, just to kind of hear you use that in conversation with a friend, and just to help them sort of see, like, if I can just pinpoint what these handcuffs are that are on me right now, and if I can just say, okay, that's what these are. Cool. Now I can actually work through that, having identified what that is, and come out the other side of it with some form of action, even if it were to be seen as imperfect to many.
And it should be. So are we willing to be vulnerable enough with ourselves and or the trust of a spouse or a friend or a coach or somebody else? Because that is really where we need to start. Again, the oxygen mask on ourselves and like, what is holding me back? Why not serve? For a long time in 2023, it was like, ooh, but I can't serve other entrepreneurs yet.
Right.
So no matter where we are, we always have something that's holding us back. And once we, to your point, can acknowledge it, now we can start to address it.
Love it. Kristin, this has been an absolute pleasure. I've loved having you on. I've loved us working through so much of these keys to really helping people get unstuck in so many different ways, but also just get way, way, way more comfortable with just leaning into some form of action, even if it is to be imperfect. Before I let you go, where can we learn more about Kristin Gutierrez?
Oh my goodness, yes. Say yes to sevenfigures.com is the best place to go these days. Say yes to sevenfigures.com. We can link that in the show notes, I'm sure.
We sure will.
Yeah, it rolls off your tongue. Say yes to sevenfigures.com. I'm excited to have another book coming out this year and to just constantly release more tools and strategies and content to help other people. So thank you so much for having me, Steve.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. I look forward to following all that and keeping up with what sounds like a very fast pace that you're going at things with. But it's very exciting to be able to learn more about it. And Kristin, I just appreciate your time again, and thanks for everything.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. And my thanks again to Kristin for joining us on the show today. I'm going to keep it fairly short and sweet in terms of my final thoughts, and my food for thought for you to take away is to go and act. Act now. You heard it in Kristin's story. You heard it a little bit in my story as well. Is this notion of when you have a intuition or a feeling that there's a direction that you can go take it. Stop worrying about it being perfect. Stop worrying about having all the right pieces in the right place. At a certain point, no matter whether you're an entrepreneur, a coach, whether you're a person climbing the corporate ladder, whether you're a student, whatever it may be, wherever you are, even in a personal side of your life, if there's something you see is necessary and that you are capable of doing, go and take the action, take the step, make it happen. Even, like I said, even if it's imperfect and even if it's not the result you initially want, I assure you, you will be better for taking the step and taking the action. So I appreciate Kristin's insight around encouraging us to do that today. And as I let you go, I'm going to remind you, as always, to be subscribing to the show, to take the time to be sharing this with a friend. If there is someone in your world that that can benefit from this kind of content, please go ahead and share the show. Don't forget to rate the show. 5 stars, I believe, is always the standard that we are trying to aspire to and achieving. And in the meantime, as always, folks, best of luck with anything and everything you have going on in your world. And I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.